Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this session of Automation Hour. As always, we'll get started with just a few of our housekeeping rules. And so Cassie's going to be our lovely Vanna White for this first little section here. So first of all, logistics on slide 2.
Mm, Can you see my screen?
Yep, we got
Okay,
that.
there you go.
Awesome. So all lines are muted. However, we are monitoring both the chat widget here in GoToMeeting as well as our Automation Hour Trailblazer community. So feel free to post your questions there. We do have a policy of trying to get all questions answered before we end the session. We are also recording, and so this will be posted to our YouTube channel once we have that recording ready to go. As always, we invite you to interact with us wherever is most comfortable for you. We're on the Trailblazer community. Of course, our website with all of the upcoming presentations. We're also on Twitter. Most recently, we've just added a LinkedIn page, and of course, our YouTube channel is where we post all of our recorded sessions. We have also just opened up our call for presenters for July through December. So if you have a use case, whether it's beginner, intermediate, or advanced, some really cool flow that you've built or tips and tricks that you'd like to share with the community, we would love to invite you to present on Automation Hour with us. As you can see here, we're
Mhm.
rounding out the first half of the year with a bunch of great sessions. So we hope you will sign up for those as well. And of course, we cannot do this without our sponsors. We want to say thank you first to Concrete.io, who has been with us since the very beginning. And we also have a new sponsor who has joined us most recently, Salto. So
There
if
we
you
go.
have not heard about them, we definitely encourage you to check them out, and we thank them for their support in bringing you this every other week. So yeah, up next, it's always great to think about where we came from. So David, Jennifer, and Rakesh about 6 years ago came up with this wonderful idea and brought it to the community. But as we know, things will change over time. So we've had a little bit of change in the co-hosts. So now you've got both Rakesh and I as your current co-hosts, and we are thrilled you're here today. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our Salesforce MVP guest presenter and all-around amazing woman, Cassie Supolowski.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, welcome this is my first time presenting at Automation Hour. I am currently Senior Director of Data Solutions, a nonprofit called One Goal. I am a Salesforce MVP. I also co-lead our Chicago nonprofit Trailblazer group. I've been using Salesforce and in my role since 2014. So for anyone else who is familiar with when Trailhead came around, that makes me feel real old because I say, well, we didn't have Trailhead back then. I am now 8 times Salesforce certified. I get jazzed and I'm passionate about speaking at events, and this is my first automation hour. I a couple years ago started presenting and didn't know most of the words that people were sharing and just kind of hoped that information about flows and automation would seep into my brain, and it worked because here I am. So a couple of ways to find more about me. I'm on Twitter, Sepolowski__C. I also have an awesome admin job board where I try to source and post entry-ish level admin roles, so things that might be in a power user role or for folks who are new into the ecosystem. Always happy to have folks going there to find jobs, posting jobs there, and that is just run by me. It's just in a dev org. It's very cool to set up, but definitely looking for feedback if anyone wants to visit that. I'm also on LinkedIn. I promise if you Google Cassie Sepolowski, you will find me. I'm the only one. And same thing on the Trailblazer community. So what I'm going to cover today. So I wanted to make sure I could talk about the underlying problem, which I think is always really important when we're talking about building out a flow, because that's usually what we're trying to do is solve a problem. Talk a little bit about how we got here or what we had done to date as a team, how we got started, a couple of our usability features in this flow, and then we'll jump into Flow Builder and take a look, hopefully have a flow demo, and then take some Q&A. So I work at a nonprofit, so we have cohorts of students. So within a high school, we have students who are part of a class, and sometimes those classes don't move forward. They're no longer part of the program for whatever reason. The partnership doesn't go through, or students need to change classes, and so we need to deactivate a cohort. And this first bullet point here is a quote that I actually found in one of the documents that I had from my team when we were trying to figure out, how to improve this. We actually wrote, "This is an annoying multi-step process that's easy to mess up." And it was an annoying multi-step process that was easy to mess up, even sometimes when our admin team was the one making the updates. And that's because we were looking to change the status, so change a field, or fields rather, for anywhere from 15 to 40 student contact records. And again, multiple fields there. We need to update the cohort object, which is a custom object. We need to update maybe the high school account record that they're associated with. And then there's also a teacher's contact record and a teacher's user record that might need to be updated based on what is true about why that cohort is no longer moving forward. So it was lots of manual steps. Like I said, there's multiple scenarios that could be true. Maybe that teacher still has other groups of students. Maybe that high school does or doesn't have other cohorts. Making sure that things are updated so that when we're trying to report out on this, thinking about student count and some of those metrics that we're sharing with our board and with donors, that they're accurate. So if fields are missed, either validation hits, or there's missing data because we never could quite find the way to make sure that validation rules were checking for every single possible scenario of how data could be entered. And that was why we ended up doing a lot of cleanup. And then also with the user record being in play here, so our teachers actually have logins, we need to have some cases special permission for end users to update the user record. And so that time, a lot of it fell to us. So at first, we would just make all of the changes. Our admin team would just say, let us know and we'll take care of it. There was a lot of back and forth about some of the details. So why didn't the cohort move forward? When did they end? Is it all of the students? Are any of the students moving to another school or to another class? And then we said, okay, at very least, we need to document the steps, which, should have been one of the first things we did, but, we don't always get there in the first try. So then we said, all right, let's document the steps and start to document these scenarios. And so that allowed us to say, we've got some power users on some teams. We could say, all right, here's the updates that you can make, go do X, Y, and Z, and then let us know, and we'll finish out the process. And again, as our organization is growing, it's also not super sustainable for our team to be updating this every time. This isn't a scenario that pops up a lot, but it's enough that it makes sense to build a process around and try to find a more sustainable way to actually figure out how to cover all of our bases and make sure that everything is taken care of. And that the folks who have the most information are the ones taking care of, implementing the process. And so we made sure that our power users got some of the permissions that they needed to make the updates manually, gave them instructions for how they could update multiple contacts from a list view. I think this actually started back when we were still in Classic. So the order in which you had to update the fields was super important and almost always caused issues. But inevitably, our team still had to make some fixes. And so there was always still something we had to pick up or something we caught later. And so we decided that this was something, again, because it was error prone, there was a lot of steps to it. We decided that this was something that we wanted to build a flow around. And so how we got started. The little screenshot here is actually documentation from one of our team meetings. So the first thing we did was talk through it. And because we had already had documentation for the process, even though it wasn't in flow, we had a really great place to start from. So we had some place that we could go and say, hey, we've already talked about a lot of the scenarios that might happen. Let's take that and then figure out what that means for flow. And so being able to outline this, I think is, it was certainly helpful in this instance. But I was going to say, if you don't have a process, you don't have a flow. If you don't know what you're trying to build around, you should not be building. You really need to make sure that you understand in words or in another visual space that isn't Flow Builder, what it is that you're trying to do, and then translate it. And especially for folks who are new to Flow, I think that's a really great way to make Flow feel more accessible. I promise you, you have a lot of skills in your backpack that are going to help you understand Flow, and being able to either visually or write out processes is a great way to jump in, because then you kind of go in with a little bit more information and you're not just staring at a blank Flow Builder canvas trying to figure out what you're going to add on there. So talking through it and outlining it in this way was beneficial and is beneficial for a couple of reasons. First, it allowed for ongoing work and iteration. So we were able to kind of outline what it is, what the best case scenario was. We were able to, see in one spot what are all of the possible ways that this might run, what are all the possible inputs that someone might hit or enter, or what are also the possible errors that they might hit. It also allowed us to build in pieces. So again, this was a team effort. We actually started from here, and then as we each had time or work blocks, we were able to jump in and build out additional pieces of it. So also, if you have a team of admin, you don't have to, not everyone has to build a single flow on their own. That's again, a really great way to understand flow and to understand what's going on. If you can see and digest what someone else has built and then move on from there, or tweak what it is that they built. So again, this allowed us to account for any errors and outliers. We knew that this was not going to be, we were not going to be able to account for every single scenario in the first run. It wasn't even something we were aspiring to do. We knew we wanted to hit the most use case scenarios, and also for the end user experience, make sure that they had a way out or that they knew what was happening. And spoiler alert, for us, that meant when all else fails, create a case. So for those outlier situations that maybe we couldn't quite figure out how to make flow handle in our first go around, we just said, okay, great. If this is the scenario, then take this information and create a case for our team, and we will handle it from there. So again, we were able to highlight features for version 2 and version 3, and this is something that we're continuing to iterate on. We also wanted to make sure that we had some usability features in place. So for anyone, especially end users, updating a lot of data can feel really scary. So we hear this from our users a lot, where they're just like not comfortable in the system, or they're not sure what's going on. Or alternatively, sometimes they just click a button not knowing what it's going to do, and that's not necessarily any better. But we wanted to make sure that they knew what was going on, because in this case, the flow was doing all the work, so they couldn't necessarily see all of the records. So we wanted to make sure that we could show them up front what was going on, so that they could say, yes, this is right. And it also kind of gives a fail safe. So if something goes wrong in our flow and it finds, for whatever reason, we missed a piece there, and it finds 300 students instead of 5, then we have a human person there to say, okay, no, that doesn't sound right. Let me stop here. So, and bonus here is that they can also appreciate all of the work that went into the automation. And so when we say this automation is doing a lot behind the scenes, they can actually see all the things that it's doing. So this is what you see here is one of the first pieces we put on our flow. So fellows are what we call our students. So we put on there, and I'll show you, we'll get to how this comes about. We said it looks like there are X number of fellows or students in this cohort that need deactivating. If that looks right, keep going. And so we tried to put some of those things in place so that, again, there wasn't this like, ooh, should I click next, or I can't trust this automation, but also helping them understand the power behind the click of a button. And so another part of that screen, this is what it looks like in the flow builder, is we have a bunch of conditional statements based on all of the information that might be true about that scenario. So we're telling them what's going to happen, and again saying, if everything we shared here doesn't sound right, just click cancel. And they can reach out to us, or they can, try again, or whatever it might be. But if something there looks off, so we're telling them, again, how many students are going to be updated based on, whether or not the cohort needs to be deactivated or not. We're going to tell them what fields on that record we're changing. We're going to tell them a little bit about the teacher. So if the teacher has other active cohorts, whether or not we're going to cancel them or deactivate them or keep them active. What's going to happen to the high school record, and then also, again, the scenarios that we can't cover. So you'll see this last one here. It says, it looks like this cohort might have been co-taught. So we're also going to create a case for our team, because that's a special scenario that has extra sharing rules and public groups that we just didn't feel the need to build out in Flow, because one, that is more nuanced, and two, again, version 1 didn't need to hit every single scenario that might be true. So this is the screenshot of the flow before I use the auto layout, and so we'll jump in here in a minute. But again, you can kind of see all of the things that's going on. We could probably make this twice as big to cover every single scenario. But I kind of want to give a caveat. This is under construction. by no means I'm claiming that this is a perfectly run flow, that it's never going to run an error, that it is like the most bulkified, beautifully, like best sort of processing flow you'll ever see, but it does the job almost all the time as it's currently built. But in my opinion, flows are never final. They're always under construction. There's always room for improvement. There's always something else that you can iterate. And even as I was going through to prep for this today, I found like three more things where I was like, oh, it could do this, and it could do this, and it could do that. And so I created Jira tickets for my team because again, nothing's ever final, or things change that maybe we didn't, update here yet, or there's just little tweaks that we can make sure that we're changing in order to make this as helpful as possible. So before I get started, before I jump into Flow Builder, I want to give a big thank you to the App Exchange and the Data Generator app, which is free. So this week, as I was going to seed my sandbox for a demo, I couldn't log in to our sandbox seeding tool, and so I was able to jump into the Data Generator tool and create a bunch of my fake data that I knew I needed. And so just a little plug for this tool and the App Exchange. It'll read your schema, it'll create fake data. It's not the most robust thing. It's a little tedious to fill out tons and tons of fields. But in this case, I didn't need tons and tons of fields. I just needed some records. And so if you're ever in a pinch and you need some fake data, this is a great tool to check out. So I'll show you this real quick too. This is our data generator app. So you can see it also stores the runs of your data. So if you are doing automation hour in the future, after you sign up to do the second round this year, you can use Data Generator app to get data so that you can demo. So let's take a look now here. So this is, again, I said I went with auto layout here. Transparently, this is the first time I've used auto layout, so hopefully I don't fumble around too much with it. But this was a slightly prettier view than the one I had in the slide. So you can see the first thing that we're doing here, let me actually zoom a little bit more, is we are getting, I need to fumble in a little bit. We're getting all of the records that we need to run this flow. So we are getting the custom object, the cohort. So this button sits on the cohort and they click it and it launches the screen flow. So we've got a lot of steps here before we even get to a screen. We are looking up all of the students or fellow contact records associated with this cohort. We're looking up the teacher's contact record and their user record, which is a community license, which is extra fun. We're looking to see if there are other cohorts related to the high school and to the teacher, because that's going to come into play later as well. And we're also looking up the high school record itself. And so all of this, you can see, runs to our fault screen. So if anything goes wrong, they get a cool little screen. Actually, let me find, nope, where's my fault screen? See, should have stuck with the old view. They get a fault screen with an adorable little Astra that says, oh no, something went wrong. Here's what you need to do to fix this, or just so they're not like, they don't get some random error and not know what's going on, they can get that there. So always make sure you have a fault screen. And if you want to get even more nuanced, make sure you have a default fault email that goes out, or customize that if you'd like. So let's jump back up here. So again, we're grabbing all of these records, and then what we're doing is we're counting all of those. We're counting the ones that we want to start with. So we went and said, okay, for all of the students that we looked up, give me create a variable for how many there are. Same thing for how many cohorts are related, or this custom object is related to the teacher, and how many are related to the high school itself. And so this is going to help us on our first screen share some of that conditional information. So on our first screen here, that's where you saw the screenshot in the slide, where we have a bunch of, again, conditional statements so that we can let them know what's going on. So based on how many cohorts or how many students we found, or what we know about the teacher, we can say, okay, based on what we know, these are the actions we're going to take. And so they can decide if that all sounds correct, if it's accurate, and then we can move forward. And we'll see what this looks like for the end user after we go through the flow itself. So now we're looking up the fellows. So we're going to have anywhere, like I said, probably from 15 to 40 students. And each of them is going to need to have several fields updated. And so we're going to loop through, my favorite, loops, loop through each of those contacts that we found in our get element above. And we are going to add the fellow to the collection, and we're going to change those couple of fields for them. So their status, when they left, why they left, what date they left, the reason that they left the program. And then after it, we're going to go through and we're going to update all of those students. And again, you can see this is going to go to our fault screen in case anything goes wrong. Next thing we're going to do is update the cohort. So that is a fairly straightforward one. We are simply changing the status of that cohort to false, so not active. Again, we have information from the first screen that we got from end users, say when was this cohort no longer active, and any place that they shared any notes, we're going to update the cohort with that information as well. So that one's a little more straightforward, no looping needed because this is only launched from a single cohort. And then this is where we start to use some more of those variables and make some more decisions. So what we want to know is if the high school has any other cohorts. If the high school does have other cohorts, then they are still an active partner. If they do not have other cohorts, if there are 0 active related cohorts and therefore students and teachers to that high school, then we want to make sure we can update the high school. And again, all we're doing here, pretty straightforward, we're moving that partnership status to lapsed. And again, this is from the initial information we found to say how many other cohorts are there based on the inputs we have. We'll update the cohort, and again, we've got our fault screen. All right, getting even more fun here. So we also want to know if the teacher has any other cohorts, because if they have other cohorts, then we don't need to deactivate them. And so we check to see, does this teacher have other groups of students? If they do, then we're also curious if they have, then we need to figure out, okay, do they need to keep the same permission? So for each year of the program, they have access to a different community, and that community access is given through a permission set. And so if they are only teaching juniors now and not seniors in high school, there's some permissions that they don't need anymore. However, if only one of their classes of seniors left and they still have some seniors, then we don't want to take that permission away because then they won't be able to do what they need to do. And so we're looking up here to see, does this teacher have other cohorts and are they within the same year? If they are in the same year, then we don't need to remove permissions. If they are not in the same year, then we're going to come down here and we're going to remove permissions. So unchecking, in our case, we have another automation that assigns permissions based on a checkbox on the user record. So if they don't have the same cohort year or the same class of students, then we say yes, remove permissions. And we're doing that with the decision element to say, based on which year of the program they're running into or they're leaving, those are the ones that we're going to go uncheck that value on the user record. And then that automation is going to run and remove that permission. And again, we're running that PD user update here. Now let's flip to the other side of it. If they don't have any other cohorts, then we know that the teacher is no longer active. And so we can also update their contact record to say, you know, this active teacher value is no. So pretty straightforward there. And again, we're going to run the actual update and run a fault. Now, this is where I hit an error when I was trying to build this out, and I had no idea what it meant. Thank goodness for Google and Jen Lee and all of their Flownatics out there, because what I ran into was a DML error. So what was happening was I was trying to update. It happens when you're trying to run non-setup objects with setup objects. So non-setup is the contact, setup is a user record. So in this case, you see I updated the contact, and the next thing I want to do is update the user. So when it was running back to back, it said, nope, you can't do that. That is a mixed DML. And so mixed DML, again, is running, trying to update a non-setup object with a setup object. So one of the creative and, you know, one of the ways to get around that is to break up your flow with a screen element. And so, again, letting our users know what's going on, we let them know. Reminder, our automation is doing a lot of work so that you don't have to. So thank you. And click next to continue. So again, we let them know there's a technical purpose here, but you don't have to worry about what that is. And by the sheer fact of having this screen here, it breaks up that DML and so that you can overcome that mixed DML statement. Now, it is a screen, so this needs to be in a screen flow. That is not going to work if you're not running a screen flow, but a quick and easy way and pretty painless, and a little way to kind of lighten the idea of a flow for your end users if they're using a screen flow. So now we can run and we can update our user record to also actually deactivate that user record. So now you see we're coming back over here. The same thing ran if we needed to update the permissions here. And then, again, try to navigate out of my screen here. There is, if I can find it. Sorry, y'all, I told you I should have just kept in my flow element. So sorry, I was looking right at. There's a decision here, and this is a great way to highlight improvements that can be made to this flow, is that my decision element is not named very clearly. What this decision element is actually doing, yes, it's telling me if I need to create a case, but what it's actually looking at is we have this, this value that is saying, is this a co-taught cohort? It means that there are 2 teachers, so that means there are 2 user licenses, and in order to get everything available to everybody, we've got some public groups and we've got some additional sharing rules. And again, like I mentioned before, it's just a little too complex that for us to have wanted to put in flow the first go around, especially because it just doesn't happen that often. And so there's a formula here that says if implementation tag contains co-taught, so if the cohort has been designated as a co-taught cohort, enter yes, if not no. So that's what this field is. And so this decision is saying if this variable or if this resource equals yes, then create a case. So it's going to do, basically the flow is going to do as much as it can. And then it's also going to create a case to let us know that there's additional steps that our team needs to make. So again, default, if it is not a co-taught cohort, then it's going to come out and it's going to run a success toast, which I'll show you in a moment. If it is co-taught, then it's going to create a case. And once again, we have now toggled between a setup and a non-setup object. So remember, the last thing that we updated here on either of these branches was a user record. So whether we are here or we were over here, it was a user, so we were in a setup object. And now in this branch, we're trying to modify or create or update a non-setup object. So we needed another break in the DML, in that mixed DML. So again, they're not going to hit the screen every time. It only hits if they're kind of fall into both of these things. But again, we've got Appy again doing her thing, letting us know, good news, you're almost done. You're so close. We promise. Just click next. And then that allows us to go ahead and create that case. And then again, you see our faults to our fault screen. And then we've got a couple of actions that we added in here. So we've got a success toast, which everyone loves a toast pop up that says, yes, yay, you did the thing. It worked. And so our success toast just says cohort deactivated. And it's a success type, so it is green. And so folks can see that to confirm, yes, it's done. And then we also had another action here where we are returning to the cohort that they started from. And so we like to always make sure that we can control where folks are going after a flow to the best of our ability. And in this case, we figured, well, it'd be great for them to go back to the flow so that they can, or sorry, back to the cohort to confirm that everything they thought was going to happen has happened, that, the status is deactivated or, not active, that the students have been updated, et cetera, et cetera. So that is what it looks like in our flow. So let's see if I had the right set of test data in here. So I've got a couple of test cohorts here, and we have a couple of different scenarios. So I'm going to pop a couple of these open. Let me go with, I'm going to do this one, and we'll do this one. So let's see where this is. So the first thing to see is you can see a button here. So we have our flow and an action button here, and click it, and it's doing all that get data. We're getting all of our records. So at this point, it has figured out how many fellows there are. So you can see this one only has 3. So again, creating test data. So this one has 3 students. It also now, the flow already knows everything it needs to know about the teacher, everything it needs to know about the high school, about the other cohorts for the high school, the other cohorts for the teacher. And so here we can choose a date. We can also control what information they're putting in. So before, people had to go manually do this for every single fellow, every single student record, come in, update the cohort. If they did it in the list view, all of the data probably got assigned correctly, but they didn't always get everything. So now you can see we also get that help text. So it says, thank you. Here's what we're going to do if you click next. We're going to change the status for those 3 students that we talked about. We're going to uncheck the active box on this cohort that you started from. And here's some information about the teacher. It looks like Kalila doesn't have any other cohorts, so we're going to deactivate their user record and set active PD equal to no on their contact record. So again, they know what's happening, and again, they kind of understand what's happening behind the scenes, so they know all of the steps that it takes. We also found that high school 1, very creative, I know, doesn't have any other active year 1 to year 3 cohorts. So we're going to set one goal partner field on a high school record to lapsed. Now let's say this user said, oh, I know that this school has other cohorts. That doesn't seem right. And so if that's the case, they can just click exit and nothing has happened. But we have given them that choice. We have shown them all of the information that's going to be updated. And then if they say, oh, wait, I forgot, they don't have any other cohorts. So you can come back in here, click the button, choose the values. Let's say this is Wednesday, and we're going to just test data in here and click next. And it's running. Again, it's doing a lot of information. There's our API. So that's the first one. This is happening again. That's that first DML split where we're breaking up between updating the teacher's contact record and updating their user record. We promise click next, and there's our beautiful little toast. Cohort deactivated. Our active box is now unchecked. Semester inactive is Y1 Spring. That's what I chose on there. Program implementation note, I was very creative and wrote test. And here's our related contacts that have now all been updated to a status of left 1 goal. So that's one scenario. Let's actually, I'm gonna pop open this one. Let's see what happens when I look at someone who's got 2 cohorts. All right, so same button, same layout, deactivate cohort. We've got 8 fellows here. Let's go ahead and see what else it's gonna tell us about this cohort. I'm just gonna tap my keyboard a little bit there. And again, here you can see there's a little bit different information. So we're still gonna deactivate those 8 students. That's our first line here. We're still gonna deactivate the cohort because those 2 things are generally always true if a cohort isn't moving forward. But in this case, Alexander Hamilton also has 1 other cohort, so we're not going to touch their user record and we're going to leave their login active. That also means we're not going to update their contact. We chose not to put too much information about what we're not doing. But you can also see an extra note here that says, it looks like this cohort might have been co-taught, so we'll also notify Data Solutions via case to review any sharing and permissions for the co-teacher. So let's go ahead and click next. Let it run. And there's our unhandled fault. And apparently, in this case, we don't have something set up. And this is actually now I'm realizing because we don't have the co-teacher set up in my test data. And so we're going to ignore that one momentarily and see if we can find another example here. But I'm happy to start answering questions. That is kind of the overview of the flow builder and what it does. And again, the caveat that I probably don't have a full set of test data in here, but happy to walk through any other demos or examples and cross my fingers and hope that it works in my test environment. You're laughing because you know.
The questions have been rolling in, and yes, it's never going to be a live demo that goes smoothly. That's just not how this works. But first of all, we're going to go back to the very beginning, and Peter would like you to know, Cassie, that it's okay. You're not that old. Real old is if you can say that you were around when App Exchange was not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, App Exchange has been around as long as I know, so thank you.
So that is from Pete. Then, so we've got several questions from Pavel. So the first one is, why haven't you used subflows, which could make your flow easier to capture or look through?
Yeah, certainly could. We have transparently, our team has not done a lot with subflows. It is on our radar as we're moving from process builder and workflows into flow. We have a lot of process builders. And so transparently, actually, some of the things that we've thought are, making sure we're going through that process and giving all of our automation a more holistic view. We do have subflows in some places. Um, but honestly, in this case, we were really thinking about this as I think what was helpful for us is like it really is one process. We could launch out to, and you can see I lost my beautiful page layout. We could launch out to another flow that does, just a user update, but at the time we don't have other flows that need to touch anything in here. But yeah, I think that, like I said, there's iterations on flows and probably what we would look at, when we go and revamp this next time.
Perfect. Okay, so next up from Ellen, for lookups at the beginning of your flow, what would cause a fault? Does a failure to find any records in the lookup generate as a fault?
That is a great question. This is for us as our safety net because I feel like there's all sorts of things that could cause a fault. Um, there weren't specific things in mind that we were planning that would have a fault. And I actually, I don't know the no records answer off the top of my head. I wonder if someone else does.
It kind of does. So it will continue on and just say failed to find records. It will throw the fault when it gets to the point of I expected
Right.
you to
Yep.
find a record and I want to use it. And it
Yep.
goes, well, I don't have any, so I guess I'm going to go watch TV.
Yep.
In order
Exactly.
to find a
So
record. So,
let's say for some reason our cohort didn't have a teacher assigned to it, so that lookup wasn't assigned. Yep, then you're right. Exactly. Thank you for that. Then we got to the part where it says, okay, update the teacher, and now I'm all out of sorts because my view is not what it was 5 minutes ago. But when it got to the point of trying to update the teacher, then it would say, I don't know what to do.
yep. All right, Pavel's second question. One caveat here. What would you do when the user abandons the flow in the middle? So some of the transactions have been performed, but there's still more to go. So how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, we don't. We keep an eye on it. We have not had anyone do that to date. But that's a great, I think, another use case of, giving them a warning for what happens if they do exit out of it, or, again, building something into the flow that says if it stopped here and it didn't complete, then do X, Y, or Z. So yeah, again, further room for improvement and open if anyone
Absolutely.
else has ideas about how to handle that.
Okay. So Andrew, I enjoy the use of Salesforce characters in the flow, makes it lighthearted, but also just not as boring as words. So nicely done there. Heather followed that one up with a question. Where do you find the Appy images or do you make them?
Great question. So let me actually, I do want to show how I got this in there because you can put it in as text. Can you all see my screen again?
Mm,
Okay.
yep.
So this is display text, and now in the new builder, you do have, you can look up to anything in your file. There are some caveats. I think if you are looking at putting this, if you have guest users, they need to have access, but I believe if it's internal, anyone should have access to it. You might need double check me on that. But answer your question, Google is one great place. Salesforce mascots, the Trailmoji app on your phone. That is another great like source of so many images. That is typically where I get them from. So I'll go to my Trailmoji app on my phone. I save them to my drive on my phone, and then from drive I put them in here. So yes, like loads and loads of all sort, and like they have these little phrases. Some of them don't have phrases and are like just given a thumbs up, which is also fun. So yeah, tried to make it lighthearted because we knew like, okay, yes, you have to click again, but also before you had to click like many times. So just click next and smile.
Absolutely. So fun fact, actually, my former co-admin that I used to work with is on the call today, and
Oh,
she built a screen flow that included a GIF. So
oh,
not only can you use static images, but you can also use GIFs. So shout out to Devin, who's on the call today, for doing awesome stuff. And who doesn't like cat GIFs in their flows, right?
right?
If you
No.
don't tell me. I don't want to know.
You
Um,
know, I stuck with Salesforce mascots because otherwise the decision fatigue would be too great. If I was charged with finding other things that weren't necessarily Salesforce specific and were just like cute cat gifts, I would never get a flow built. So thank goodness
I
for Salesforce mascots and images.
Yeah. So Andrew wanted to let everyone know that Alex Edelstein actually created an awesome ScreenFlow component that will close a DML transaction for you on unofficial SF.
Oh,
Andrew, I would be curious to know if that also works in non-screen flows, and I'm going to try and copy paste this into chat so all of our attendees can get a copy of it. And he says nope, which is super, super sad.
Is it this? Wait, this?
It's use the commit transaction. Yep, that's the one.
Okay, cool. I will add it to my slides then too.
Phenomenal. Okay, so I got that link posted in chat. So Andrew, thank you so much for that. All right. Pavel would like to know, how have you managed to embed images in the flow?
Yeah.
Was it a rich text component? And this one, I think you said was just display text with the image.
Yep, exactly. But I
Okay,
think there is also a
there it.
display image. Um, and I don't remember why we chose one over the other. I think it was arbitrary. And I also don't know if I feel like display image was newer.
It
So we
also
might have.
takes more steps. I think you have to actually
Mm,
upload a static resource or a document to be able to use
oh,
as a display image, and
maybe that's it. Let's see if I
super
can.
easier to do display text.
Oh, yeah, way more. No, I don't want to fill out those fields. Nope.
Yep.
Mm-mm.
All right. So Nina would like to
Laziness is the
know,
answer.
I'm with you there. Nina would like to know if you could talk more about the navigate to record. She thinks this is a great solution for one of her projects.
Yes. Oh goodness, again, these are things where I'm like, I built these things and I don't remember off the top of my head. This is, I don't remember if this is a unofficial SF thing, but I know unofficial SF has navigate to anywhere, which doesn't work in every scenario, but it works in most of them. And so I think this might have been one of their earlier versions, and anyone please fact check me on that. But essentially, what you can do here, again, exactly, you can say like what record ID you want to go to. And so in this case, because we're starting from a cohort, we can reference that cohort because we have it in one of our resources. Um, but there is also, since I'm on here, there is also another item. Oh, here we go. Navigate everywhere, not anywhere. Um, so there's another whole outline of all the things you can go. So you can go to a web page, which I actually use in my little side job board thing. Um, Again, there's some caveats as to where you can use it, but yes, it's really great because then, like, I honestly don't even know what the default. I feel like flows just open back up sometimes, and I'm like, that's not useful, especially like in this scenario. You already did the thing; you don't need to do the thing again. So yeah, great, really great to really control where your folks are going. I think with it, navigate everywhere, you could send them back to a home page. Um, you could send them to the high school record in this case, or a parent record of some sort, or maybe a report someplace else you want them to check. But yeah, super handy. Unofficial SF, if there's anything you're trying to do with flow and you're like, oh, darn, it does not do that out of the box, I can almost guarantee there's probably some sort of solution that will get you at least part way to what you're trying to do in unofficial SF.
Yep. Andrew chimed in again. I think navigate to record might be part of the base package for
Mm,
unofficial SF, the flow actions and screen actions. I also, for some odd reason, thought there was actually just a native navigate or screen end. So I would not quote me on that, but look into it potentially. And yes, Andrew, there's tons of great stuff in the base packs that are
yes.
generally required before you can install some of the more complex components.
Yeah.
Um, but Heather would like to know, are there any security issues with things that come from unofficial SF? I have an opinion on this, but Cassie, let's start with yours.
I plead the fifth. I don't know. I don't want to have an opinion on it. I don't think so. Not a big enough concern that I will not use them. Is that an answer?
I think that's an answer. So Heather, I think the thing that you have to keep in mind is that unofficial is legitimately unofficial. Just because the Flow PM from Salesforce has kind of spearheaded and curated this content, none of the actions or elements that you're going to download and use from here are officially supported by Salesforce. If they break, Salesforce will not support it for you. However, all of the people who are contributing to this are pretty well known and very upstanding members of the community who, as far as I know, don't have a malicious bone in their body. So I think that's has to be more of a what your company and security team are comfortable with. I have used this in multiple orgs. But again, that's a case by case basis. And the good thing is a lot of the code is available for review on GitHub. So you can also grab the source code, have someone review it, and then install the source code in the org as opposed to some of the packages. So I think that's kind of a up to you and your org, and your mileage may vary thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully that answers the question there. If not, let us know. All right, more questions coming in. Was your flow primarily designed as an outline in a Google Doc? Do you have any suggestions for designing the flow before actually building it? Like your suggestion about how we really should be thinking about the process before we just jump in and try to build the flow.
Yep, that was a Google Doc. It was an agenda for, we have a monthly innovation time. And so just a Google Doc with some bullet points. And that was sufficient enough for us to get started because, again, we had been doing this manually. Then we documented it in actual documentation for like, here's what you need to do. Here's all the different scenarios. We had all been doing it for a good amount of time. And so it was sufficient enough that we could take that just Google Doc and move it forward. Um, but again, if you wanted to, if you wanted to see a more visual thing, I mean, you can also, to some extent, start to build in Flow Builder without like having all of your things in place, just to get an idea of like where might your decisions be. Whiteboard, like you could just whiteboard it to say like, okay, this would be a decision point. I think it depends on what makes sense for you. Again, I knew it, and so we were able, we did say like, what's a get records, what's a conditional, conditional text and things like that. There's lots of tools out there. There's all sorts of builders that you can use, visual designers. Like we use Mimeo, is that what it's called? We use that sometimes. Formerly real-time boards, you can use that. Sometimes like good old like Paint or Paint 3D, just like start writing on there, even like using some of the images in Sales or not Salesforce, in like Google Slides, like, they've got pictures and so you can start to map things out if you want, like, the decision to be a diamond and something else to be a square. But I'm curious if anyone else has ideas about how they kind of map those things out before you start getting building.
Yep. I think one of the things that I've used before is I used to whiteboard everything out, but instead of drawing it, I'd make everything a sticky note. So that way, when I realized I needed to
Ah,
move it, I didn't have to erase everything and start over. I could just erase my lines and move my stickies. Um,
I also have a
Going a little
handy
bit,
whiteboard notebook. So if you're ever looking
yeah.
for whiteboard notebook, whitebook, great.
And then also things like Lucid Chart or
Mhm.
Draw.io, or I mean, again, Paint or even Publisher, just anything, that has boxes and lines in it, or, flowchart type software you can use to kind of figure out your flow that way. So Melissa Hildes, hi, glad to see you. She says kudos on the usability features, perfect for the new UX design focus. So giving you
Thank
some
you.
thumbs up there.
Appreciate it.
All right, so next question. Bao would like to know, can you show more how you used a single screen flow for all of your error handling? And then there was a follow-up question, how would that work for record triggered flows? And I think the first thing there is record triggered flows obviously can't have screens. So
Yep. Yeah.
how would you do
So
that?
yeah, and that's where I mentioned, making sure in this case, because it is a screen flow, we want folks to know to the best of our ability, although you saw where my fault failed, that like we know something happened. Because what usually happens in the fault is they get that red text that you saw on my screen. And then if you've got your emails turned on, you get the generic, like something failed and it's got all of this information in there. But users don't know that like that you got that email if you have that turned on. And so we always try to make sure, at very least, if it is a screen flow, that we have off screen that I can go to and just say, hey, like we know something went wrong. We have the information. If you need, like, and in this case, again, we say like if this needs to happen ASAP, create a case for us because then we'll just do it and ignore all of the issues that you ran into. And so we just have every single fault that we could think of where it would happen on an update or get records. And actually you can see, I think this is the one, oh no, that will go there. But all going to the same screen. This is a great case for subflows. So I believe there was a couple presentations at Northeast Stream and a couple of presentations out there on the interwebs about how to just have a fault subflow that would then also show a screen, but then you can use it in every flow. And then you can also control the emails that are going out to admin or other users, whoever needs to know certain information. And so you can control more information and probably be more specific about what happened rather than just that, like, or in addition to that giant email that you get. So that is an option, and that would be an option for the record triggered flows. It wouldn't necessarily tell your end users unless that email went to whoever was running it, I think.
Yep. And I think you can set if it goes to whoever was
Like
running it or somebody else.
$sign
Anyway,
user.
yeah. Anyway, never mind. All right, let's see. More questions. Got to keep scrolling here. This is fantastic. Um, Caught that one. Alan did chime in with, unfortunately, there are some update challenges with unofficial SF.
Mm.
Andrew says, yep, he uses subflows for fault messages. And then Mark would like to know, can you confirm a record triggered flow can call a screen subflow? And I can 100% confirm that is not possible.
Thank you, because I did not know the answer.
Yeah, you can call, so from a screen flow, you can call a subflow that is either auto launched or another screen flow, but
Right.
you cannot from an auto launched record triggered or other triggered flow call a screen flow. If the first one does not have a screen, the subflow cannot have a screen.
Right. Which, if you think about it from, like, because you might be like, oh, that's not fair. If you think about it from the Salesforce standpoint, it doesn't necessarily know, it won't always know, like, which, if like the user that caused that change on the record should be the one that sees the screen, where are they at when it runs. So it, like, just does, it wouldn't know where to appear, I think, is like the best way for me to describe that, and like how that's sorting out in my brain.
Yeah, there's something that I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but you can pop like a toast message to a user with some Apex action, or pop something up to the user when they hit save, so it's not quite like a screen flow, but there's
Mm,
something that actually appears to the user. I built it in Rad Women, which was kind of cool, but that was all Apex. But I think there may be some sort of like a toast action that you can use on unofficial.
yeah, so
Um,
there's a toast here. I suppose this could be a URL and be like, click this to continue. I don't know. Wouldn't really, yeah, I don't know.
don't 100% remember, but I thought I saw something like that on unofficial. But generally, as the rule, if it's a screen flow, you can have a screen subflow. If it's not, you can't.
Yeah.
So yes, there is a cooler show toast on unofficial. Andrew, I think they need to make you an official spokesperson for unofficial. These are great. Um, all right, so for now, I think we might actually be through all of the questions. So I think if you wanted to show a second use case,
Oops, I stopped my screen.
keep
Let
going
me
through
see if
here and
I
making
can
sure we
find it.
didn't miss any questions because there are many.
Let me see if I can. Oops, let me do that. Let me put my cohort. Let's see if I can make. I find one that I think will run. Deactivated. I'm not sure if this one will run based on the data I have in. Let's see what happens. I don't remember if this one was different or not. So this one is a good example. Like, again, we see a lot less data. So we're not going to do anything with the high school. Let's see if this one comes to fruition. And then I'm actually going to show you a very, cohort deactivated. So that one was a lot simpler. It didn't have a lot to do. So we didn't hit those mixed DMLs because we didn't need to deactivate the PD. So we didn't have a setup and a non-setup action item. But just because it's automation hour and any flow is helpful to see, I also want to show you the like single version of this, which we do actually have is a subflow to a larger flow. But again, a great use case for especially beginning folks. Sometimes, like, the easiest way I always say to get started with is with a screen flow, and to say, okay, just update a record that somebody is currently on. Let's see if I can find it real quick. So again, I talked about, this is the example I used was deactivating an entire cohort, but sometimes we just need to deactivate a single student. And so again, this is a great way just to say, okay, we have just a lot of fields that need to be filled out, and can they fill these out manually? Sure. But they have to find them on the record. They're all in the same spot, but that doesn't mean they're clicking on every single one. So if they don't click them all and they don't follow the directions, then they're going to hit a validation rule. And in some cases, again, like I mentioned before, we can't get validation. We could never quite get validation to do every single thing that we needed it to catch. And so we still ended up having reports that says, okay, if this is true and this is true, then there's something wrong with the record. And so we can't require these fields on the contact layout because they're not always filled out, but we can do that in this flow. And so again, we can say here, these are required. We can set some values to say, okay, let's, default to today's date if we wanted, or what's the current semester, default some text or anything like that. And so again, a great way to control your data quality, to enhance the user experience, because they're not trying to hunt down and see what are all of the fields that they need to fill out. Instead, very similar, they come to, oops, I already updated that one. Let me go back and I'll show you what this looks like on a student record. So similar to on the cohort, we have a status update button, and that's where you'll see, again, those fields pop up. And again, this is the subflow. So first it's saying what do you want to do, because you can both remove a student and add them back. And so in this case, this is launching a subflow. So we're going to remove this student, click next. Now this is talking to another flow, and you see those screens, those fields here, some that are defaulted. And then you can go ahead and update those. So I think that's another, again, both kind of in the individual and the bulk level. And so if you've got one, you can start to think about the other version of that. So if you have a version of this where you're trying to do the same thing to a record over and over again, are there scenarios in which that needs to happen for a lot of records at once, in which case you can build out a bulk flow. So again, if you're new to Flow, that's always one of my favorite ones to share is, and yeah, we can see one we have got, actually, I don't know if this one is still live, but update contact details. So I don't know if you probably, we maybe need to clean up our contact record. There's a lot of information on here. So if someone's like, oh, I need to update all of their contact information, they can get a button here. It's not required, so they can just update whatever needs to be updated. So again, it's a great usability feature if you don't have time to sit down and revamp your page layout, which does also need to be done, but also just kind of gets them the fields that they need to see. So what are those things that people are doing pretty commonly, that they might just want a quick hit for? Happy to take questions on those.
Awesome. So we have one that came in from the Trailblazer community from
Oh.
Hongda. So what are some of the most considerable improvements Flow brings compared with Process Builder? For example, Process Builder is resource heavy. How do I persuade my team to migrate Process Builders to Flow and put a high priority on it?
Let's see if I can find my favorite. How many people know where I'm going with this one? There is so one of them I think is processing. Processing, control, the fact that Flow is going to be the thing that's updated. Process Builder isn't going to get any new enhancements. I don't know how, again, like I said, we've got a lot of Process Builders, and we, in the past, more so than currently, have run into issues where we're like, something didn't run and we don't know why, because you can't control the order of Process Builder. If you don't, or if you aren't very, very, very meticulous about how you're running them and having them launch one another. But now you have also additional features, and I'm blanking on what the feature is called, but there's, you can, with Flow, control the order of which your flows are running. But this chart, if I can find it, is always, I think the first time I saw this, like, made my jaw drop. This is how much faster a before save flow runs than Process Builder. So I don't care what the values on that are, just the sheer magnitude of difference, I think, is, from a technical depth, from a processing standpoint. Like I said, we have a couple of things that we've already moved to before save flow and already reduced a bunch of issues because of it. And so that is some of the reasons that I would share, but I'm sure there's other folks who might have other thoughts. But I think also anytime Salesforce is going to stop enhancing something, that's a reason for me to say I'm going to use the thing that is going to keep getting cool new features.
Awesome. Okay, so we got some more questions come in. I love it. Okay, so Selena wants to know, how do you get your screen flow as a pop-out screen? Is that a lightning component, or how did that work?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a let me just look at my page here. So there's two ways to do it. You can do it with a quick action with a button. Which one did I do here?
I
Actually,
think
no,
you
let me
used the button or an
button.
action.
Um, if not, I'll go to my page layout. So I know if you use the one that takes you to like a flow URL, that will take you into a new screen where flow takes up the entire thing. And so here, yeah, you can see it is an action. And again, even more usability, they only see that button if the cohort is currently active. So if the cohort is not active, they don't see a button that says deactivate cohort. So again, thinking about little places where you're not going to confuse the heck out of your users. Let me see if I can actually jump into my object manager here and give you a definitive answer for all the technical terms. So here it is. It is a cohort action. So it's an action on the record, and then you just tell it what the flow is that you want it to run, and therefore it can read the record that you're on. And the action type is flow.
Awesome. Okay, so next question came in from, I'm going to butcher this, I apologize. Is it Venktasan? Um, does Flow provide a way for the user to update a list of records in a single screen? Thank you,
Not
Venki. I appreciate that.
not out of the box, but surprise, surprise, I think the answer is unofficial SF. Uh, we started toying with um, a flow that did this, and then the use case for it just wasn't as strongly needed as we thought. And so I'm blanking out the name of it is. I don't know if it's data table, but
Mm-hmm.
there is some. Is it data table?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can use data table and you can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. If I remember correctly, it basically looks like a list view in your flow. Um, and so yeah, you can put that in there, and then you'd be able to. Again, there's different actions you can use with it, but that would be, I think, my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric Smith is another MVP who has been on Automation Hour before. His data table component has just a ton of awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Chris, I assume you're wanting the URL for the architect guide. If you would like to confirm that.
Ah, yes, this
Aha,
is what I was
you did.
looking at. Yeah, yeah.
All right, Chris, that is now officially in chat and responding to you as well. So hopefully everybody's got that. Um, so let's see. Pat Condon hopped in with a couple of other justifications for moving. Number one, Flow Trigger Explorer, which I absolutely love. And also the ability to run asynchronously. So you can have
Mhm.
scheduled paths on your flows or run them asynchronously for some of those transaction limits and ideas. So,
Thank you. Flow Sugar Explorer. I knew it had a name that I was not justifying or giving proper credit to. So again, here you can choose your objects. You can choose your trigger. So create, update, deleted, and then it's going to show you all of the things that are happening. And this is again the insight to like again, I've had so many processes where like I build them and I'm like, I don't know why this isn't happening. This one will be an updated. Oh, this is because mine's a screen flow, not a record trigger flow. I'm losing it on Friday afternoon, y'all. Um, but if we go back to my contact, you'll see the flows that we have there. So yes, you can see what's going on. You can move things around, all sorts of fun stuff.
yep. So one pro tip that I saw somewhere, this is generally a pro tip for anything that you order inside Salesforce. Instead of starting with 1, 2, 3, start with 10, 20, 30. You have up until 2000, so you can basically get to 200 that way. But that way, if you go back and you need to reorder things, you don't have to touch and change the number on every record. You can slot them in where if it's 10 and 20 and you need a 15, you can do that. And if
Yep.
you need to squeeze in a couple more, you still have 12 and 13 or 17, 18 to kind of help with that.
Yep.
Having done that the wrong way once, 100% recommend. So
Yeah, part of the problem of being in the same org for 8 years when it's like I started my Salesforce career there, so all the things that were done wrong by me. So now I'm cleaning up my own stuff, which is fine. Probably better than dumping it off on someone else. But I'm like, darn, I should have done this sooner, but I didn't know any better. Now I know better.
that is right. Awesome. I'm going to do another refresh on the Trailblazer community to see if we have any more questions come in there. We've had a couple of people give you some kudos, Cassie.
Thank you, thank
Mark
you.
said this was a great presentation.
Appreciate it.
Pavel said he really liked the way you design the screens in your flows and how you provide guidelines to the users. It's very clear, nicely organized. So I kind of want to hire you to come build my screen flows and put Abby pictures in them too.
Yeah, like we
So
said, we just know so much about when our users like, and it is, it's like, oh, you're gonna update, 35 records at the click of a button. You want to make sure that they can feel confident in doing that so that they can use your automation and take all of that extra time that they get back to do the things that only humans can do. Because Flow can do these things, it can't, have conversations with students. And so we want to make sure that we can help them feel confident in using that and make sure that they're getting their time back.
awesome. All right. I think we may have actually gotten through all of the questions.
Look at that.
So, yep, more accolades coming in. Kristen, love the idea of giving users feedback during the flow so they know how much work they don't have to do.
Yes.
Andrew says, great work, Cassie. Good presentation. So, absolutely. Thank you so much, Cassie, for being
Thank you
here
for
and
having
presenting
me.
this. So, absolutely hope to have you back. Hope
Would
some of
gladly
our
be here again.
attendees will also come and present with us on Automation Hour for the second half of the year. And as always, we'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks all.